Nvidia built its reputation on one promise: if you pay a premium for its hardware, you're getting the best AI performance on the planet. But what happens when a flagship machine, priced like a small car, starts behaving like an underpowered prototype the moment real developers touch it? What if some of the most respected names in tech come out and say it delivers barely half of what was promised, and critical workloads in medicine and research simply fail to run the way buyers expected? How does it feel when you spend 5 figures on an ultimate AI workstation, only to discover it struggles with performance, runs into software bugs, and raises questions about whether the hardware itself is being held back? Then, this frustration spills onto social media, and internal emails reveal the CEO personally ordering executives to hunt down negative posts and urgently reassure angry customers. So the real question is, how bad does a product launch have to get before top executives scramble to put out the fire themselves? And what does that tell you about the gap between the marketing and the machine on your desk? In this video, you'll see what went wrong with Nvidia's DGX Spark, why influential developers and researchers sounded the alarm, how the company reacted behind the scenes, and what it all means if you rely on high-end AI hardware for your work. When Nvidia announced the DGX Spark in October 2025, the messaging was clear and ambitious. This was supposed to be a desktop revolution for AI developers. The company positioned it as a compact, ready-to-deploy system that could handle massive open-source language models, run complex neural network training, and deliver workstation-class AI performance without requiring a data center or a custom-built rig. The official specs promised up to 240 teraflops of computational power, 240 watts of maximum power consumption, and the ability to run frontier-class AI models locally on your desk. It was priced between $10,000 and $15,000, depending on configuration, targeting researchers, startups, universities, and enterprises that needed serious AI horsepower but didn't want to deal with cloud costs or infrastructure complexity. Nvidia marketed it as plug-and-play AI for professionals. The pitch was simple: unbox it, power it on, and start training models or running inference workloads immediately. The device ran on Nvidia's proprietary software stack, which included pre-configured CUDA environments, containerized model libraries, and integration with popular AI frameworks. For companies like pharmaceutical giants or medical research labs, the promise was especially appealing. They could keep sensitive data on premises, avoid cloud latency, and get enterprise-grade performance in a form factor small enough to sit on a lab bench. On paper, the DGX Spark was exactly what the AI community had been asking for: power, convenience, and local control. But when independent developers and researchers actually got their hands on the hardware, the story changed fast. John Carmack was one of the first high-profile figures to go public with test results. In late October 2025, he posted his findings on social media. The DGX Spark wasn't hitting anywhere near its advertised performance. Instead of the promised 240 watts of power consumption, the system maxed out at around 100 watts. Instead of 240 teraflops of computational throughput, it delivered roughly 60 teraflops in real-world testing. That's not a minor variance. That's delivering less than half of what was promised on the spec sheet. The lead developer of Apple's MLX framework independently confirmed similar findings, reporting that the device achieved only about 1/4 of its anticipated performance levels in some workloads. Then came the memory bandwidth issue. The DGX Spark's measured bandwidth was just 273 gigabytes per second. Users immediately compared that to consumer devices like Apple's MacBook Pro, which delivers competitive or better memory bandwidth at a fraction of the price. For AI workloads, memory bandwidth is critical. It determines how fast your model can pull data during training or inference. If the bandwidth is too low, even a powerful GPU sits idle waiting for data. And that's exactly what users were experiencing. But performance wasn't the only problem. Early adopters reported widespread software bugs, system crashes, and incompatibility issues that made the device nearly unusable for real work. One user, Jensen, an executive director at the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca, posted on LinkedIn about the buggy software experience. He acknowledged the hardware met some performance claims, but the software stack was riddled with issues that prevented him from deploying it in production. Another user, Christopher Kuzios, a medical researcher, had an even more personal and devastating experience. Kuzios purchased the DGX Spark to study rare brain tumors. His daughter had died from cancer, and he wanted to use AI to research whether his sons were at risk. When he received the device, software incompatibility rendered it completely unusable. He reached out to Nvidia support and waited 38 hours before receiving only an automated response. Frustrated and desperate, he posted publicly on LinkedIn about the experience. His post wasn't just technical criticism, it was an emotional appeal from someone who had invested his own money and hope into a tool that simply didn't work. And here's the part most people don't realize: Heating problems were appearing even at the reduced power levels the device was actually running at. If the system was already overheating at 100 watts, what would happen if Nvidia managed to unlock the full 240 watts through a software update? Users began questioning whether the hardware was fundamentally misdesigned or whether the thermal constraints were deliberately limiting performance to prevent failure. You probably think that if you spend $15,000 on enterprise hardware from the world's leading AI chip company, you'll get reliable support and rapid bug fixes. But what actually happened reveals how unprepared Nvidia was for the backlash. When the complaints started appearing on social media, they didn't stay contained to niche developer forums. They spread to LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, and even reached mainstream tech journalists. And that's when internal emails reveal what was happening inside Nvidia's executive suite. CEO Jensen Huang, one of the most hands-on leaders in Silicon Valley, was personally monitoring the situation. When Justin Johnson from AstraZeneca posted his criticism on LinkedIn, Huang sent a direct message to his team with a blunt instruction: jump on X and say, "You will fix." That phrase, captured in internal emails obtained by Business Insider, shows how seriously Nvidia took the public relations threat. Huang didn't delegate this to a community manager or a support lead. He personally ordered his staff to engage critics on social media immediately. Nvidia launched what can only be described as a social listening campaign. Staff members were assigned to monitor posts across Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, and Nvidia's own forums. They flagged complaints from influential figures, tracked sentiment, and reached out directly to users who posted criticism. When Christopher Kuzios, the medical researcher, made his emotional post about his unusable device, Nvidia executives flagged it internally. Engineers were dispatched to diagnose and fix the bugs affecting his system. Within days, Kuzios received direct outreach from the company. His issues were resolved, and he posted a follow-up praising their response. He wrote, "In more than 33 years working with large technology companies, I have never seen an organization respond that quickly to public technical feedback. But here's the critical question. Why did it take a public post to get that level of support? And what about the users who didn't have large LinkedIn followings or connections to journalists?" Industry analyst Anshul Sag offered insight into Nvidia's motivations. He noted that the company has become increasingly reactive to public criticism because of sensitivity about the stock price and how negative sentiment can draw that down. Nvidia's market valuation is tied directly to its reputation as the leader in AI infrastructure. Any perception that its products are failing or that competitors are catching up can move billions of dollars in market cap. The DGX Spark backlash wasn't just a product issue, it was a potential threat to investor confidence. Another analyst, Kate Holderhoff from RedMonk, observed that C-suite engagement during product controversies has become more common in founder-led tech companies. She said it can signal authenticity and accountability, but it also carries reputational risk if the response is perceived as defensive or dismissive. In other words, Huang's hands-on response could be seen as either admirable leadership or as a sign that the company was in full damage control mode. Now let's talk about what this actually means for the people who bought this device or who are considering it. Imagine you're a researcher at a university. You've been allocated a $15,000 budget to purchase AI hardware for a grant-funded project. You choose the DGX Spark because it's from Nvidia, a trusted name, and because keeping your data local is a requirement of your funding. The device arrives, and within the first week, you discover the software crashes every time you try to load a specific model. You submit a support ticket and wait. Days pass. Your grant has a timeline, your students are waiting, your research schedule is slipping. This isn't a hypothetical edge case. This is exactly what happened to Christopher Kuzios. Or consider a small AI startup trying to develop a new healthcare application. You need to process patient data, so cloud services are legally complicated due to privacy regulations. You invest in the DGX Spark to keep everything on premises. But the memory bandwidth is so low that your inference times are slower than expected and your application's performance suffers. You've already committed the capital. You can't just return a $15,000 workstation like it's a consumer laptop. You're stuck. Or think about a journalist working on an investigative piece that requires analyzing large data sets with AI tools. You purchase the DGX Spark to maintain source confidentiality and data security. But the system's instability means you can't rely on it for time-sensitive work. You miss deadlines. Your credibility suffers. These aren't abstract risks. They're the direct consequences of launching a product that wasn't ready, and they fall hardest on the people who trusted the brand and invested significant money. After the backlash reached critical mass, Nvidia moved to contain the damage. In January 2026, at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, Jensen Huang took the stage and announced major software optimizations for the DGX Spark. He claimed the updates would deliver up to 2.6 times higher performance in certain metrics. The improvements would enable the system to handle 235 billion parameter models locally and support multiple simultaneous workloads. On the surface, this sounds like a win. The company listened and they fixed the problems. But dig a little deeper, and the cracks are still visible. First, the performance improvements were described as up to 2.6 times faster. That phrase is doing a lot of work. It likely means best-case scenarios with optimized workloads, not real-world average performance. Second, even with the optimization, the device is still only delivering the performance that should have been there at launch. Users who bought the DGX Spark in October and November 2025 essentially paid $15,000 to be beta testers, and some of those users still report that the thermal issues haven't been fully addressed. If the system is now running closer to its advertised power consumption, is it overheating more frequently? Third, the CES 2026 keynote itself received mixed reviews. Some attendees described Huang's presentation as disappointing, criticizing the lack of groundbreaking consumer announcements and excessive focus on enterprise products. The DGX Spark updates were buried in a longer presentation that didn't address the fundamental question: why was the device released in this state in the first place? So what can you actually do if you own a DGX Spark, or if you're evaluating whether to buy one now after the updates? First, if you already own the device, make sure you've installed the latest software stack released in January 2026. Nvidia pushed the updates through its enterprise software channels, but they aren't always automatic. You'll need to manually check for firmware updates, CUDA version updates, and container image updates. Go to Nvidia's enterprise support portal, log in with your product serial number, and download the latest DGX Spark software bundle. If you're experiencing thermal issues, monitor your system temperatures using Nvidia's built-in diagnostic tools. If temperatures consistently exceed safe operating ranges during normal workloads, document it and escalate to Nvidia support. The company has shown they respond to public pressure, but you need evidence. If you're considering purchasing a DGX Spark now, after the updates, do your own research beyond Nvidia's marketing materials. Look for independent benchmarks from users in your specific field. If you're doing medical AI, find other medical researchers who've tested it. If you're training large language models, find developers who've published real training, times, and throughput numbers. And critically, ask about return policies and support SLAs before you buy. If you're spending $15,000, you need a clear guarantee that if the device doesn't perform as specified, you have recourse. For anyone working with sensitive data, consider whether the DGX Spark's current state justifies keeping data on premises versus using a cloud provider with better established infrastructure and support. Sometimes the cheapest option isn't the one with the lowest sticker price. It's the one that doesn't cost you weeks of lost productivity. The Nvidia DGX Spark disaster isn't just about one failed product launch. It's about what happens when a company prioritizes speed to market over delivering what they promised. It's about how even the most dominant player in an industry can stumble when they assume their reputation will carry them through. And it's about the gap between enterprise marketing and real-world performance, a gap that costs people real money in real time. Jensen Huang's hands-on response might have saved Nvidia from a larger public relations catastrophe, but it also revealed how fragile confidence can be, even for a company valued in the trillions. If you own a DGX Spark, update your software and hold the company accountable for the performance they sold you. If you're considering buying one, wait for independent verification that the fixes actually work in production. And if you're watching this because you care about how tech companies treat their customers when things go wrong, share this video with someone who needs to see it. The only way these companies stay honest is when enough people know what really happened. I'll see you in the next one.